Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Customer Highlights. Today, with me is Kason Knight. Kason is the founder of iSolids. So iSolids is a rapid prototyping and also large volume production company based in Texas. So today, iSolids have more than 150 printers and 40 plus material across the five different technologies. So I know Kason for I guess 7 years now, and proud to have him as the one of the first customers. Yeah, so welcome, Kason.
Thank you. Glad to have you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Let's call it the show. Yeah, I mean now iSolids is quite a large company, and a lot of the customers, a lot of the large customers as well. So what I wanted to start with is, of course, as always, humble beginning. First, I guess let's talk about specifically when your passion about manufacturing, engineering, of course, arose. So when you starting to feel, yes, this is something that I want to do, for the whole of my life, maybe for the first part of my life. But yeah, tell us more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'm a Texas guy, born and raised in the suburb of Houston, and never really had any intentions of leaving Texas. And so I went to Texas A&M, got my mechanical engineering degree. And I give that context because one of the big things around the Houston area is the oil and gas industry. And so I grew up around it, was involved in the ups and downs of that industry, and was fascinated by all the technology around it. So point being is with my mechanical engineering background, I always assumed I would just work in the oil and gas industry in various sectors, mostly in the oil field services side. And so that's what I did for first 7, 8 years of my career. And I definitely enjoyed it. Again, a lot of people I don't think understand the complexity of the oil and gas industry, and especially the subsea side. A lot of people equate it to being more difficult to explore subsea than it is to explore space, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So I was definitely fascinated by it. But that's kind of fast forward. I think it was 2015, 2016 timeframe, and I was working in an oil field services company. It was kind of I would say, small, mid-size pub or privately owned company. So, 100, 200 million. So it definitely wasn't a small company, but in comparison to a lot of other oil and gas service companies, it was privately owned, smaller company. So in 2015, the oil and gas industry took a big hit, and they didn't know if it was going to last 6 months, 2 years, or a decade. And it was a good amount of time there that it was struggling. Probably worked for about another 2 or 3 years, but during that time period is when I fell in love with 3D printing because I had a need as a kind of an R&D supervisor to continue some of my projects during this time of economic downturn, at least in the industry. And 3D printing became a solution that I'd never really examined prior to kind of keep some of these projects going. And I'd had some exposure to it back in my undergrad time, but at the time they really only called it rapid prototyping. They didn't refer to it as additive manufacturing or 3D printing. So in the back of my mind, I just thought, well, this technology is only good for prototyping, and that's where I left my understanding of it. Point being is in 2015, 2018 timeframe, I saw this technology is quickly growing. I call it the MakerBot era. It's when
Okay.
some of these patents were expiring, and the consumer market was growing, and the hobbyists were catching on. And in that time period, I basically just thought, wait a second, it's not a rapid prototyping machine. This is a manufacturing machine, and how you use it is up to you. Yes, you can prototype. Yes, you can produce. Depends on your application and where you go from there. So I guess the best way to summarize it is my passion in 3D printing came from my own need and my own desire to use it as a solution for the problems that I had.
Awesome. So, did you have any of those like MakerBots at home, or how everything started with iSolids? Because again, so I know that it started as I mean, it's never started as a farm, but it actually get to the kind of farm, stage
Yeah.
farm level of the. So how it all started?
Yeah, so I got a MakerBot clone. I think it was in 2015, 2016, and it was like I think a Flash Forge. It was that same type of MK7, MK10 extrusion platform that was pretty popular at the time. It's interesting because that machine I think cost, even as a knockoff, it was like $1,600. And so it was decent size. It's not something you're going to go to Best Buy and buy on a just because you're walking through and think it looks cool. So it was definitely at that price range where it's a little bit less of a market, a little bit more barrier to entry, at least on the consumer side. But when you compare that to the professional side, it's really not much of an investment at all. So it was an interesting little purgatory, dollar investment amount. And so I say that because I was working my full time job, and I thought, well, it's $1,800 or $1,600, whatever it is. So that's a pretty expensive hobby. So maybe if I can just sell some 3D printed parts on the side, I would love to turn this into what I call a self funding hobby.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really the original goal. Basically, just got one machine. It was in a closet in our office and just kind of running off to the side. But yeah, we started off with a MakerBot clone.
Mm-hmm. So basically, it's sort of the side hustle in the beginning. Even I think it was very before the Etsy, like the thing, the
Yeah.
race of the Etsy, basically any marketplace where you can actually like promote your services. Like, okay, so I do some 3D printing services. So how you actually started to sharing this with the people. So who was the first customers for at this side hustle?
I think that's when a lot of people ask how we, got business and gained some traction from the beginning. And I think it comes down to two factors. One, good timing.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I would say it's the fact that I was a professional engineer by trade, and I didn't necessarily just grab a part and print it. And I was really looking for genuinely good applications, and to trying to solve problems. And it's still our kind of a motto today. Like, I am not a fan of being I guess a fanboy, for lack of a better term, of like certain technologies or material. I'm a fan of anything that provides a solution. And so that's how we started and how we gained traction, because I looked around and thought, okay, this 3D printing technology solved my problem here. So what other problems have I had over the last 5, 6, 7 years that it could have solved that as well? And let me reach out to those people that I know are still dealing with that problem and see what they think about this and see if I can help provide a solution to them. So that's kind of how we gained some initial, I guess you could say, traction. And then the other part that I mentioned, which was timing. Well, there was 3D hubs that came out at the time, and that was this like online marketplace. I called it the eBay of 3D printing when it first came out. It was very interesting. Anybody could log in and create an account and sell their services. And we did get some traction on there initially. I think it had a lot of different factors. It's, again, just like an eBay or any other market platform, where once you get a good reputation, you tend to go up in the rankings, and it's kind of the snowball effect. So we did see that early on. And again, I would contribute that though to the fact that I was looking at every project from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is focus on the solution, and the technology will supplement that solution rather than the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned 3D hubs because, 3D hubs, through their history, of course, they changed the business model quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like even though they kind of switched the model from the hobbyist or sort of the hubs, for the hobbyist printing spots, but I guess they actually was in the beginning of this I would say of this boom of the 3D printing services as well. It looks to me that they might be the reason why some of the 3D printing services just come up on the market at all. Because
Yeah.
I mean, you're starting to see, okay, so there's some issue, of course, that I can solve as the engineer. Of course, they also like the marketplace that where I can promote my services, and this is how it all started. Yes, of course, like from the business model perspective, I guess the hobbyist market is not the best, even though like Etsy, I guess, I guess make it right somehow, which is
Yeah.
cool, of course. But 3D Hubs definitely was behind one of the greatest 3D printing services. I'm pretty sure they were the reason for that. So
Yeah.
that's actually very cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. And I would say our business has followed a similar, path or trajectory as theirs, when in that, we mostly were talking to consumers. I was talking to friends, family, whoever. that needed a little widget here or there. And it worked, especially when there's 2 or 3 machines and I'm running out of a closet or my kid's playroom. Like that's okay. But once you start to think bigger picture and scale, I mean, business to business is where typically more consistent, higher volumes, better margins will come from. And I think Hubs went that trajectory. And there was definitely some turmoil and backlash, in the industry and the hobbyist space when Hubs has made some of those transitions. And I don't think it's exclusive to what 3D Hubs has done. A lot of others have done the same thing.
Yeah.
Fictive, Xometry, they've adopted a similar strategy. And so I think that's natural as you kind of define what your space is. And there's been that evolution, right? For I would say about a 5, 6, 7 year period, there is this space of like, okay, are people in the consumer side, are we trying to push 3D printing into everybody's house? Or is 3D
Mm-hmm.
printing an additive manufacturing and industrial technology? And that's the route we're going to go. And I fundamentally think it's both. It's just, you know, I use the analogy sometimes of, there's vehicles for every type of application. And if I'm going to go pick up groceries, then I don't need a dump truck. That's not the vehicle for me. And vice versa. If I'm trying to excavate a large site, then I'm not going to use a pickup truck to do that. And so, my personal opinion is that it does occupy both spaces. It's just not going to occupy it in the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is my vision as well from the beginning. Like, I never think about the 3D printing as a technology that replace everything, every other technologies on the
Yeah,
market. What I
agreed.
think from the beginning, like, it's going to be the technology that will be just great add-on to other technologies. Like, okay, so we have this sort of the gap of the prototyping initially. Of course, that's how basically 3D printing was became the became what's famous for. Then its gap was filled, and then there's another gap where we're talking about not high volume parts, high volume
Yeah.
printing or high volume production, but something maybe under, I don't know, 10,000 of the parts or something like that. And it looks like 3D printing now filling this gap for
Yeah,
sure.
for
You
sure.
definitely able to print 10,000 parts. You can do it locally, of course, and you can provide the services for the customers that previously was ordering the same amount of parts from whatever, from China, maybe from Asia, and that's great. But again, it's not the question whether or not 3D printing will replace everything. It just finally found not just one but multiple applications on the
Hmm.
market, in the industry. So that's, I guess, beauty of what we're experiencing now. Yeah.
Absolutely. I always say that we don't have an industry that we're tied to. And that's actually one of my draws personally into the industry. Again, my background was in oil and gas, where like you just knew every 5, 10 years there's an up and a down, and you worked your way through the downs and you enjoyed the ups. Whereas with 3D printing, when I started looking at it, I was like, this literally can apply everywhere.
Yeah.
And to this day, I can't think of an industry that we really haven't somehow been involved in. I mean, it's from aerospace to, obviously that's a big one in the additive industry, but aerospace, medical, automotive, consumer electronics, IoT devices, and even things that I never thought we'd be involved with, like women's fashion, like it literally
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And when people ask, like, well, where do you find clients and what kind of industries do you focus on? I always say that I don't necessarily focus on an industry. I focus on a volume. And I look around and I say, okay, that is a type of product where somebody's going to make 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 parts per year, and they're going to iterate quickly. That's
Yeah.
where additive manufacturing, in my opinion, just excels. And
Yeah.
I fully agree. And everybody talks like we need to take on injection molding. If you're making 10 million parts of the exact same small price commodity thing, injection mold it. Like
Hmm.
that's what you should do. My personal opinion on that is when we try to push 3D printing where it doesn't belong, it actually hurts the case of where it does belong. And it
Yeah.
kind of creates a bad taste in people's mouths when they're like, well, that my experience was here and, it's too expensive. It didn't work right. Well, that's because we might have tried to push it where, that really wasn't the best solution. So a little bit of a
Yeah.
caveat there.
Completely agree. Completely agree. So switching the gears back to your company, of course. So again, you started in this as a side hustle, of course.
Yep.
So then it became a kind of the 3D printing farm with dozens, then hundreds of the machines, of course. And now, of course, again, have 150 printers, FDM, MGF, few other technologies. So how, and again, with your background as an engineer, how you feel about the culture, about the team culture, about the company culture, of course, because that's something that basically that of course changed over the time, and that's a
Yeah.
big thing. Because if you
Mhm.
want to scale the business, I mean, that's the same question to the people, to the team. Of course, you need to build a culture, keep this culture, of course, hire right people, of course. So, what's your take on the on this culture, and of course on the team culture, and of course how it's changed from the very early days to the days to today?
Yeah, for sure. Scaling and knowing where we are and being self aware, I guess, has always been something that has been a continuous lesson learned on my end, and it's just a constant evolution. I actually saw a I guess a competing company slash friend that mentioned on a podcast how they come in every single day and it's constantly a new change, a new problem. Some people thrive in that environment, and some people get discouraged by it. And I think personally, additive manufacturing, 3D printing as a whole is, yes, it's maturing, but we are still very much in our infancy. And so understanding how to scale is challenging because there's not an existing playbook. For example, restaurants have been around for tens of thousands of years, and you can look up a lot of business books on how to start restaurants. I'm not saying it's all going to be the exact same, but there's some playbook to go off of, or even just service companies. Like there's similarities in it. And I'm not saying that what we do is necessarily rocket science, but we do come across things that are new challenges that most people just don't have to deal with. The main one being the fact that a lot of our products are serialized, bespoke, 100% unique products. So when we're looking at producing in high volumes, you naturally gravitate towards Lean Six Sigma practices where it's one piece flow or whatever it might be to increase efficiency. Well, you throw in the fact that every single product is unique, and all of a sudden a lot of those traditional strategies kind of go out the window, and you got to think of some new variations of it or even come up with your new solutions. So kind of taking a step back, we first started as a side hustle. So there is no SOPs. Every SOP is in my head, and that's fine. That works fine. But I also realized that if I wanted to bring on new employees, then my mindset has to change. And then the next step is, okay, now I have 2 or 3 employees and we just communicate together. We don't have to have a process in place because there's continuous communication. Well, you double that. Now you're at 10 or 15 employees. Now communication becomes the biggest challenge. And then you go to the next step and you move to a new facility, and there's, new technologies, and there's even a greater team where now you got to, rather than 5 people that all know how to do everything, now you got to have 20 people that have each individual tasks, and there's new challenges, and you got to restructure that way. And I had a good mentor several years back that basically said, be careful, because there's typically a mentality where there's somebody that's very good at startups, and then there's another type of mentality that's very good at, small growth, or basically that, basically taking a company from $500,000 to 10 million. And then it's a totally different jump from 10 million to Fortune 500. And they're just different mentalities. I would personally say that we're in a little bit of in our growth phase right now. We're in a challenging spot because, we compete with big companies, and we have a lot of requirements, but yet we're still a team of 20 something people. So we're definitely in one of those periods right now where you're kind of shifting gears. The best thing I can say, though, is we've always looked and used the resources we had, but planned for what we are in the future. For example, when we're working with Digifabster or creating our processes around things, we make sure that we have solutions that accommodate the existing. But when we're implementing that solution, we're already planning for the next thing that's going to replace it. And what that helps us with is when that replacement eventually comes around, we're not getting our feelings hurt because, hey, this thing that I worked really hard on is now obsolete. We already planned for that obsolescence from the beginning, and we're way more prepared and emotionally ready to make that happen to the next step.
Right, right, right. No, that's important, and something that you mentioned about the scaling from the 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 10. That's completely different. Not only mindset, but of course, in many cases, it requires just different people, of course, and
Yeah,
different people and
for
different
sure.
processes and things like that. One other thing that again I noticed. Yeah, you mentioned the competitors, of course. You mentioned the scaling from 0 to 10, 10 to 100 and more. Are you envisioning iSolids as the, like close to the public company, like 100 millions company, $100 million company, of course, or you rather want to keep things not necessarily small, but decent size when you still mostly know everything, mostly control all the things. So what's your appetite for that? That's
Yeah,
that's that's interesting to me.
that's a great question. So looking back and think, okay, why did people come to us knowing that, hey, somebody's got an option between this, big established 20-year-old company or using iSolids, which has been around for a few years and much smaller, right? The reason they would typically choose us in that environment is because we are smaller, we're more nimble, we can provide more customized experience rather than over here, like, hey, this is our process. You either fit it or you're not getting our product. And I say that because I do want to continue to grow. We've had a very strong growth rate, very consistent growth rate for several years, and that's very motivating. And I want to keep that momentum going. But at the same time, I don't want to ever overextend so that we get away from that core fundamental experience that allowed us to get to where we are currently. That's a challenge. And kind of going back to our previous question, it means that we have to change our processes to allow that. For example, people got very comfortable talking to maybe one or two people. Hey, these are your touch points for all customers. Well, okay, that works fine when you got 100 active orders. Well, what are you going to do when you got 200 active orders? And that's no longer the same. It's not viable. It's not going to be good for anybody involved. So what can you do to have that, provide that same output, same experience, but with a totally different process? So going back, we do have a big appetite. I personally think that we can, be one of the largest, highest volume producers in the U.S. I think we already, as far as utilization, I think we're very, very high. Our machines run nonstop, and I think that's a good thing for not only us, but also our customers, because it allows for quicker turn and all that other good stuff. So I'm not trying to turn this into a sales pitch, but yes, I do genuinely think that we can be, at least in Texas. I also focus on that. There's enough market in Texas to feed a big appetite that we have here. And so if we just focus on just that environment, we got aerospace up in Dallas, we got medical and oil and gas in Houston, we've got automotive in Austin, we've got technology in Austin. There's so many markets just in Texas that if we can just show people what we can do here, we'll be fine and we will
Yep.
continue to grow. And our mission statement is to be the largest, most established, dedicated additive manufacturing facility in the southern U.S. region.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and very interesting thing that you mentioned again, sort of in between being as personal as possible. I mean, in the relation with the customers, of course, like provide this feel where customer just know who he talking to, of course.
Yeah.
Customer success manager, application engineer. It always felt great for your customers, of course, and of course with the scaling, that's something that can disappear. That's something that I guess large companies, of course, I can't say they're struggling with that, but the solution that they now finding for that is sometimes weird. Sometimes, again, we're talking about AI, for example, right?
Yeah.
So like, and AI in all shapes of forms. It's not just chatbot AI. It's many other forms, phone calls and other stuff where humans replaced by artificial intelligence in that case. I mean, of course, from the perspective of the large business, that makes sense because again, you can't hire thousands of the people, or just not cost effective at least,
Yeah.
and still provide this customer experience. So of course, you can use technology, or let's call it automation in that case. And that's very delicate balance. So where
Right.
apply automation, where not applying automation, where to scale things up, where to keep things, kind of intimidating, small or whatever. And so what's your current approach? And again, I'm not talking about like something in 10 years from now, but what your current approach in automation, and what exactly you're applying now, like how you using like any hardware automation, of course, software automation, and overall how you feel about that, given that now we are living through the AI age, sort of, and of course, this technology evolving, well, basically every single day. I hope that it will not replace human interactions at all, because it's important, of course. But so, what's your take on that?
I think it's really interesting because yes, we are big fans of automation because we're a lean business in that I was thinking about it this way. I genuinely think we are 20, 30, 40% more efficient than other businesses, which means that we can be 10 or 15% lower price and we still are doing very well financially. And it's a win-win for everybody. So we just focus on being so good at what we do. Now, with that context is we always want to make that focus on things that are non-value add, not to bring in some cliche like Six Sigma and lean practices, but I genuinely believe that's true. There's, three factors. There's value added activities, there's non-value added activities, and there's non-value added required. And when we look at automation, we focus on those non-value add. And the reason I say that is because, as I've just mentioned previously, I think one of the biggest values we do provide is our personal experience. So yes, I absolutely are implementing automation across our business, but we're trying to be very intentional about not applying automation that removes the personal experience, but applying automation in places that allows us to go back to a more personal experience. So it's just trying to be, and there's a temptation. I see it all the time on various social media platforms where we got people writing AI articles and, images, and everybody knows what it is. And, it might look cool. But I immediately think, okay, well, I maybe lose a little bit of credibility. Like, does that person really know what's behind it? I don't know. I can't tell. And now there's this sense of almost distrust. So we have a different approach to that where, hey, all of that stuff belongs. But I think machine learning, AI, and all of that stuff should serve us rather than the other way around.
Absolutely agree. Yeah. I mean, that's the only way to me, especially because now it's really feels like sometimes it feels like non-natural at all when you reading the article. When it's not only just articles now, it's now even social posting, like even social posting
Yeah.
generated by AI. Now, like it's what trust can be built with with
Yeah.
someone that frequently posting just with the AI. I mean, yeah, so that could be a problem, and with the videos, of course, with deep fakes and stuff like that, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure we can get in trouble very quickly. So
No doubt. And I'm definitely, I wouldn't even pretend to be an expert or even a heavily educated in the topic, but I will say we have used it. We've used it as tools. Prime example, this might fall more into the machine learning category, but there's a little bit of overlap there. But we use a tool called AM Flow,
mhm.
and that is a tool that's designed to help us again remove that non-value added required activity where we produce a part, it gets mixed into a build. That build is optimized for cost. It is not optimized for ease of us processing it. And if it was optimized for ease of us processing it, then we'd be charging the client more than what we would need. And it's our discomfort should not come at the sake of the client experience. And so point being is there's some complexity around that. AM Flow is a good solution for us because it uses AI machine learning to identify the part. That's the type of activity I think that we should focus on and what we are, where it's taking an activity that was taking us away from other things.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing, which is very interesting, of course, because again, you talked about the hardware and the automation, about IM Flow, you're getting great solution. So let's switch on the sort of the customer side, of course, of the things, because again, so from one side of the things, you really want to have this very personal relationship with the customers because that's build the trust. That's really, really important, and it will be important. I hope that it will be important for every single person in the
Yeah.
world, even though we moving to the this AI direction. So what's your view on the again the things like the customer experience, because again you mentioned the competition, of course, and with the competition and with the scale, you need to automate some of the processes. You need to
Yep.
automate some of the processes that related to the customer experience. Like, of course, I'm talking about also about the order taking and things like that. So how do you feel about your customers and their experience with the tools, like, of course, mention us. So how you feel about their experience? So where is this delicate balance where yes, this process needs to be automated, to what level, of course, and where it still needs to be handled by humans? So how you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the big challenge. I think that's where uh, a lot of people should spend a lot of their time focusing and maintaining that. The way that we've tried to approach it is allow a tool to be available, but to choose the right tool when you need it. So not to try to force that solution. For example, using Digifabster as obviously a good way to move forward with this type of question. We have an instant quoting tool. You can go to our website. If you know what you want, you can upload the models, you get the pricing. If you're an existing client, we can give you a pre-existing discount code. So you can just, if you know what you want and you're just trying to get the order placed and in production, then it allows you to do that. But on the back end, if there's any questions or you'd like us to generate a quote, we can still do that. So it's a tool that it doesn't say, hey, everything's got to go this way. You have to go to our website. You have to submit the order or we're not going to talk to you. You can still go both routes. That's our primary goal is when we focus on things like, hey, we need to be flexible. We need to be lean. As much as it can be a little bit exhausting and overwhelming and maybe even a little bit discouraging at times, we are fundamentally in a business that is quick turn. I mean, we offer 24-hour turnaround, and it could be very difficult to accommodate. Hey, this client needs this right away. We have less than 24 hours to produce the part. Over here, we need to focus on these thing in production. So scheduling all those all the way out. So that becomes the biggest challenge, in my opinion, is just accommodating the different types. And then we have, one client over here that is, ordering a project for his son's engineering project or ordering a part for his son's engineering project. And we got a client over here that is, Fortune 500 that needs ISO certification and certain billing department. So again, you go back to like, do I create a system that's only going to work for this Fortune 500 and does billing? But then over here, I can't even process a simple credit card. So it's just two totally different environments. And we haven't even gotten to produce the part yet. We're just talking about how do we accept the order. So with that being in mind, again, I look at solutions that, hey, allow us to be nimble. And that doesn't mean we don't define a process. We just define that flexibility into the process. Everything has to, for example, everything has to be processed in Digifabster in order to become an order. But there's 5 different ways to get an order into Digifabster. It can be automated through one of our existing portals. You can go to the website. We can quote it manually. And so there's different avenues to do that. I look at them as what I call toll gates, where as long as the process is static at this point, and then it moves on to the next thing, anything that happens in between here, there's a couple different routes. You can go route A, B, or C, or D to get this to happen. But once you come to this toll gate, everything's the same again. And then you go through the next, and then A, B, C, or D, and then you go to the next toll gate. So that's our way of providing that more customized user experience, but still having a very defined process.
Yeah, it's very interesting because to me it feels like, especially when you adopt the instant quoting tools and stuff like that, it's actually set the expectations very high for the customers from the responsiveness perspective, right? So, I mean, of course, customer expecting instant quoting to be instant. Yes, you upload the part, you place the order, you pay for the order, but then if they also want to, if they not exactly know what they want to do, I mean, maybe they don't know materials or the processes, they need to reach out to you. And of course, they expect the same almost instantaneous response. I mean, not literally, of course, but at least they're expecting, yes, that you're available. Yes. And again, it's human available, not some AI that available and can respond to them. But that's a high bar. I guess it's a high bar when you're implementing stuff like that. So it's all about customer experience. And again, you're set the high bar for the customer experience, regardless of the tool that you use, even if it's a tool, maybe email or the phone. So you just need to be available. Yeah.
It's a society that we are now, and I call it the Amazon effect. I'm guilty myself. There's a lot of times I look at ordering something online, and I'm like, "What do you mean it won't be here for 3 days? That's crazy. Yeah. I need it here tomorrow." And the reality is, I don't actually need it there tomorrow. I just gotten accustomed to that being the expectation, and that definitely becomes something that's will I think be more and more of a challenge. Is that instant gratification, and it's tough. It really is.
Yeah. No, but I guess this level, kind of the expectation from the customers, it will be only continue to growing. To be honest, I think it's that, especially in the US. Again, because we have customers in different countries, we can see the sort of different approaches on that, of course, but in US for sure. So when you have Amazon, when you have expectations like to get something overnight, so it's something that you're expecting. But again, that's also of course for the businesses, it's opportunity to just be faster than other, like to be more responsive than others. And of course, you also always need to add this additional value, which is like human interaction, for example, because that's something that almost impossible to replicate. So that's actually can be your customer advantage, that you actually, you're a human.
Yeah.
You're actually providing like the customer experience, talking to the real humans, of course. So that's something that I guess always connected to the company culture as well. So of course you want to every single person in your company to kind of fit this culture at the same time. And of course it's then something that you basically transmit to the customers as well. So that's inevitable to me. So
One of the things that we commonly do, and we push it a lot on the front end, and sometimes customers are a little bit surprised or maybe not understand why, but if it's a brand new customer and they submit an order on our website, we will pretty much reach out and say, we need to have a meeting. Here's our meeting schedule something. We'll have a quick conversation. And the reason we do that is because there's so many times that we have other options that somebody's never known about. And we go down this path, and it's simply, a 5-10 minute conversation up front could save weeks, days, even months, whatever it is, of time, just by not having that conversation up front. So that's one of the biggest things for us, to encourage that human interaction on the front end. And, there's times where I'm like, oh, you know what, just send the order through, send it through. But there's too much evidence to prove that whenever we make that intentionality, we definitely save time for everybody and get a better result for everybody by having that interaction up front. So that's one of our biggest things, is just not necessarily forcing it, but definitely encouraging a more in-depth conversation. We don't want to ever assume. There are times, of course, we eventually have to, some customer says, you have this material, we say, why? And they say, well, I don't really know. This is the circumstance or whatever, but this is what we got to do. We can't accommodate that, but we would much rather have a conversation and find out why you need that material, because there might be other materials that are far better. They're going to give you a better result. Yeah. 10 minutes up front I always say you do not have enough time to not dedicate the time
yeah,
of those types of
yeah,
activities.
yeah. It's very interesting because there's another thing overall with this e-commerce experience, because when you have e-commerce storefront, you have multiple options on how to present your services for the customers, of course, because when you don't have anything like they have a website, of course, there's landing pages, stuff like that, all the services, all the materials, stuff like that. So, but with e-commerce and actual stuff like instant quoting, of course, you have the multiple different ways how to actually manage your strategies around the pricing, for
Mhm.
example, around the customers, around the, and again, one of the my favorite thing when I look at the website of the different companies. And again, I'm not talking about manufacturing now. However, it's actually related to manufacturing. So I'm talking about, for example, some gym equipment, right? So equipment for the workouts. And there's a couple of companies, of course, US-based companies, and they approach their pricing completely differently. And specifically shipping. And shipping is always very, very interesting topic. How you handle the shipping. So are you providing what's called free shipping, even though it's never free, like never? It's always some cost of shipping, or of course you want to customer pay for the shipping, and they can see that, okay, so it's a 10 bucks, 15 bucks, 20 bucks. So the question is basically either you embed the cost of the shipping into the pricing and not showing this to the customers and showing it as a free shipping, or you actually being maximum transparent with the customers and show, okay, so that's a free shipping. But that's to me always not about even transparency, but about the human psychology. So I mean,
Yeah.
we rather go to the company that offer free shipping, even
Yep.
though, I mean, we somewhere in the back of our mind we know it's not free. It's definitely not free. But so, what's your approach on these things, like the tactics of the e-commerce, and if you whether or not you leverage all of that in your business?
That's a really great question. I also agree. It's mainly psychology that comes into play here. And again, two different types of clients or client groups. There's the business to business, and then there's the consumer. And I think on the consumer side, they just want to know, what is this, what is the part worth? What's the total landed cost to get it to my door? And yeah, there's a little bit of psychology involved with, yeah, you're getting this free shipping, or we're going to give you a discount. At the end of the day, I mean, the price is the price, and how you illustrate that price is always the psychological part. Personally, vast majority of our business comes from B2B. And so we have focused our pricing on a little bit more transparency. And our goal in doing that is creating partnerships. Like that sounds cliche, but I think it's genuinely true. It's like, hey, we show what we call a startup fee. We show our production cost. We show our post processing cost. We show our shipping cost. We show our engineering time and costs associated with that. And the reason we just want to hey, one, we want to show that this is what it cost us. This is why we come up with this pricing. And the other main thing is there's always options, and it opens that clarity. It's like, okay, this part ended up costing $100, and if we just leave it at the part is $100, but if we show that it's broken down, it's $60 for this, $40 for this, and $20 for this, or whatever it is, then people are like, okay, wait a second. Now I see this cost factor is coming into play, and maybe that option is not so significant for me. And so that's why we like to show transparency. But I can tell you, goes back to you trying to accommodate different people, because we've had that same type of transparency, and then it goes to a purchaser agent or somebody else that I just want to know what the part cost. I got to put this into my ERP system. This is confusing me. So then you go back into I got to accommodate various types of people, different types of things. So our approach to that is, again, try to have the tool available so we can give you an invoice with that broken down cost. That's our default. We want to be transparent. If you also want an invoice that's just as price per part, and for whatever reason, we can also do that. Again, I know you didn't invite me onto this podcast to sell Digifabster, but the fact that Digifabster allows us to have those custom PDFs and those different, that's exactly our goal. We need to try to accommodate. And it's not to say either one of these types of clients is wrong. Like they're dealing with their existing circumstance or what their need is. So it's up to us if we want to serve both those types, to have a solution for both.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great, especially because you mentioned like you're dealing with the different types of the customers within your customers. Of course, it could be procurement agent, it could be engineer, it could be CEO or whatever. And sometimes you need to approach it differently, of course. And that's actually especially in B2B. I mean, obviously in B2B when your customer is Tesla, Boeing, whatever. So that's very interesting. And this B2B experience is something that sometimes not equal to the B2C experience, of course. And again, we're talking about the e-commerce, we're talking about like different experiences and different incentives that you can apply for your business strategies, depending on what types of the customers you are dealing with. So do you see any, it's an interesting question, because again, I still look at the manufacturing industry as the slightly legacy industry, of course, especially because it's, again, the roots is injection molding, and it's a lot of the practices. And again, it's a lot of the practice with the suppliers that didn't change that much in the last, 20, 30 years or something. So do you see any changes in the B2B customers' approach to the purchasing the services from you? So especially, again, I'm talking about like how many times you're like dealing with the procurement departments rather to directly with the engineers, for example. And what's your take on that? Like if B2B experience is changing or not, like customer experience, did you notice anything that changed over the last, 10 years, or it's still kind of stuck in the old days? Let's go this way.
I would say yes and no. It depends on the client. It depends on who we're working with. There's some clients that do things very traditionally. I would say they come to us with a spec sheet, 2D drawing, and they kind of equating it to a CNC. Like, hey, this is the package that I'm used to delivering to a CNC shop. And they're kind of surprised. Like, actually, we don't need any of that. We don't need a 2D drawing. We just need a 3D model. And you need to tell us what material, what the specs are, and we can help you define a material. And that's all we need. And so there's some, I guess, surprise and shock on some clients that have been doing a little bit more traditionally, that, hey, this is actually, this industry 4.0 type approach, additive manufacturing, using these more advanced technologies. Like, there's some work that you don't have to do now, and it's a little bit more streamlined. But then we also have the other end of the spectrum where people are almost so advanced that it becomes difficult to work with. For example, like ERP systems that are going to automatically submit POs and purchase orders. in order for that to work properly, you have to do a little bit of setup. You have to accommodate on our end to allow that to happen streamlined, because if an automated trigger happens, but you don't know that it happens, or if it doesn't somehow work its way down the automation line, then you lead into a worse situation than if that automation wasn't there at all. So yeah, there's again a wide variety of different types of approaches to the purchasing, I guess, challenge in that phase of the order process. One of the other things that we have noticed is the very, again, I kind of alluded to it and you mentioned it as well, the different types of clients, even, or different types of personnel and contact points or stakeholders, even within the same company or project. It can be extremely diverse. And getting the information that people want without convoluting it with the information that they don't need, which might lead them to not absorb what is mixed into it that is what they need, is a challenge. The biggest or the most common analogy for that is, we engineers typically are our first contact point. They're working on a project, we're prototyping, and what an engineer is looking for is completely different than what a purchaser is looking for. It's just they're not, purchaser doesn't know what a material is, and if we offer a different alternative material, they don't know if that's allowed. Like, hey, the engineer said this. That's all I'm saying. I need to go off of that. So it's a different interaction completely. And yeah, so that's it. I would argue that the biggest challenge the additive manufacturing industry has is the fact that we're so versatile. And it's the fact that you typically have these touch points with so many different people. It's kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, to me, it's really the beauty of the industry where, again, it's people with a different experiences, with a different backgrounds, and at the same time, it creates both challenge and opportunity to help
Yeah.
both sides of the spectrum. I mean, some of the solutions are good to one type of the customer. Some solutions are good to other type of the customers, but it's definitely the opportunity in the both sides for sure. Like, it's always some
Yeah.
opportunity to change something for the good, like to improve some of the processes, to improve something. It's always there. That's, I guess, the beauty of the industry. And as you mentioned, also it's a challenge, right? So
Yeah.
you somehow need to navigate all of that. So which is yeah, quite challenging for sure.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And just kind of as an analogy, I'm not trying to, put everything into a bucket. So this is just a generality, but if somebody's going injection molding and doing that type of route, generally speaking, the purchaser is got a SKU or product number and they just say, hey, this is what I need more of. And they just go. All the engineering technical work has already been done. In additive, that's might not necessarily be the case. Like, there's new variables are changing. There's model revisions. So we need to be able to confirm that. But the purchaser doesn't know that there's a STL file associated with it. So there's just a little bit more complexity involved. But that's,
yeah. Funny enough, it's interesting segue to my other questions. What would you wish your customers to do differently? Is it related to, let's say, on-time payments, or maybe something regarding to the paperwork, to the procurement systems, to like the net terms and things like that? Because again, like, obviously it's tons of the discussions online and offline, of course, specifically around the net terms and how those net terms was treated by different suppliers, different customers, of course. Some of the customers are good with that, like in paying on time, and it's everything good. But sometimes it can get you into the big troubles again, because we are talking about the additive manufacturers, machine shops. It's always a cash flow problem that could, just bite you at any point of time, of course. And those things are really important. So, yeah. So back to my original question. So what would you wish your customers to do differently?
there's two things that come to mind. One is, as you already kind of mentioned, getting paid on time and being paid timely is a positive thing. And I don't necessarily mean it from like, a passive aggressive type of approach, but I mean it from a perspective of, we factor everything into the cost. We have to. We're a business. We want to be profitable. We want to be able to grow. We want to be able to do new things in the future. And as such, we factor in the cost associated with chasing down a payment. And
Yeah.
so that's something that we don't want to do. If I were to ask, hey, this is the price of the part, and this is the price of the part if I have to come back and ask you again for payment. Everybody's like, well, obviously I don't want to pay more for you to come back and ask me again for payment. So if you put it in that type of context, just realize, we had a fun conversation a little bit earlier about how as a business owner, you look at time as being one of the most valuable resources. You kind of look at it a little bit differently, or at least I do. Having kids and starting a business were two things that really made me realize there's nothing I'm going to get back more than time. And if I'm going to plan my day and put a dollar amount associated with anything in my day, it's the time. And so that's why we look at it so I guess closely. Personally, and I'm just being transparent, when I worked for big Fortune 500 company directly out of college, I didn't look at it that way. I just thought of it as, hey, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. My paycheck's the same. I'm doing the same workload. It doesn't matter. Like when there's so much volume, those minutes tend to get lost in the masses. But as
Yeah.
a smaller business, those minutes add up and they become more consequential. And it's really eye opening because it's not that those minutes and time doesn't add up at the big companies either. It's just it gets lost a little bit in all of the
Exactly.
different command chain. So yeah, absolutely. Going back to the original question, yeah, getting paid on time is a fun thing, and it's not that we're in a financial distress that we're trying to chase it down. It's just the extra workload that we want to avoid. The next thing is getting or making sure that our customers know that we want to do more. And that's again sounds maybe a little bit cheesy or cliche, but we don't want to be an input output function in that, hey, you submit model, you tell us the part, and we produce it. We want to know more. Like if there's a way that this part is being produced, there's something we can do in the manufacturing or a way this part is being used. There's something in the manufacturing process that we can implement to improve that result. Whether it be a cosmetic surface versus a non-cosmetic surface, whether it be a requirement to a chemical exposure or non-chemical exposure, like all these different environmental aspects, like we want to know that. And the reason I say that, and this is so important to me, is because all the types of things that we would consider failures or that we've had to learn from, it always comes down to we didn't understand what the client was looking for, or a large majority of the time. And there is a good chance that, hey, we might say, hey, what we've got is the best thing to do. But at least we're confident moving forward that what we're doing on that order or that part, how we're producing it, is in fact the best way to do it. So that's one of the biggest things is we want to know as much as we can know. Now, of course, that puts more work on the client to communicate that, provide notes if they can, provide extra drawings, provide context. But our argument is, 10 minutes here could hopefully could be much more valuable for everybody.
That's a great point actually. I mean, the application for the part that they want to produce is something that if you can take it into account, yes, it can produce better result. So this is something that I just wrote down because I guess that's something that somehow needs to be implemented into the process in the way that it's not overwhelming from the customers, because again, like
Absolutely.
from
Yeah.
the one side, yes, they just want to place the order, but also yes, they want to place the order and get the result, get the real part that actually, not only fits their needs, but exactly like for the application that they're looking for. So that's important part. It's just a question how to make it as smooth as possible, like from the process perspective, asking those questions and not being overwhelmed. So I think it's something that I guess I want to think about and how to make it work, of course. But yeah, it's a great point. And back to your first point about sort of embedding into the price the process of chasing down the payment. So this is something that other industries, I guess, implemented way ago. So you can think about, for example, hotels. So cancellation policy. So I mean, everyone have cancellation policy. So they not want to refund anything if you cancel, like or if you cancel at all, or if you cancel a couple of days before. But of course, if you want to pay a little bit more, so they can refund it. So
Yeah.
I mean, the whole cancellation policy, I guess, just happened because yes, it's some of the customers that just use this, just cancel on the last day or something like that. So I mean, I guess it's in every industry. So you somehow need to have something in your pricing just to make sure that yes, you get this payment, and yes, you're not stressed your cash flow. So that's yeah, unfortunately it is how it is,
It's
but yeah,
reality.
it just reality is. Yeah. And to your last point about the time, of course, so that's something that, again, I think it's only when you're entrepreneur, you you literally feel this through your bones, like
Yes,
every
so true.
minute,
Yeah,
hours and minutes every day. And like you see, okay, so it's a 3 p.m. now. Wow, okay, why it's 3 p.m. I think I just started or something like that. And
yeah,
especially when you're adding like other components like the family, the kids, it's a lot of the stress. But at the same time, it teach you the time management, and it teach you of the, well, prioritization. So you're starting to prioritize things that's most important and most impactful. So that's,
yeah,
I guess, the good thing that we can get out of the all the stress being the entrepreneur. Yeah, to me it's a good school for sure.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it carries over even into my personal life when I look at, I literally will run the math and be like, okay, if my time is worth this and it takes me X amount of time to do this chore, should I do this chore or should I hire somebody to do it? And,
Exactly.
those, I used to have the mentality of I can do everything. I don't want, I want to do, if I can do it, I want to do it. But now I've got the mentality of, is this the best use of my time? That's what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah,
And it puts a lot of perspective, like, and it's challenging, but in a positive way, it puts a lot of perspective on life in general.
absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. So to my last question, so what's the next frontier? What's the next frontier for you, of course, personally, for your company? What do you believe would be the next, um let's call it the next big step for the additive manufacturing? Because now we definitely see the application with a high volume. Again, we're talking about 10,000 of parts and things
Yeah.
like that. So what's next? What's really next?
I think, I don't want to use the word bespoke, like true serialized production, like true 100%. And it's being worked on and has been worked on for several years across the additive manufacturing industry. And people focusing on different applications. Some of them have, stuck and have been successful, and others have, maybe not as succeeded as well as they would hope. I think we're going to see more and more of that. My personal hope for the additive industry as a whole is that we focus on solutions and not so much on technology. The technology will supplement the solution, and I think if we keep saying, "Hey, this is a really cool way of making something," but it's just because it's a cool way of making it doesn't make that thing any different. So I think that's going to naturally. I think it's happening. It has happened, and we've gone through waves in the industry where these things ebb and flow as certain technologies come out, new applications be developed, and so on and so forth. So from the additive manufacturing industry as a whole, that's kind of my hope for the next frontier for us. And how do we fit inside that? Well, one, going back to the operational challenge that comes from true serialized production, tracking that, managing that from every step of the process, and receiving an order of 2,000 unique parts, processing 2,000 unique parts, to getting 2,000 unique parts to 2,000 different unique locations. That's just a massive undertaking. But I think it becomes more and more plausible and economical as we go on. So I think, yeah, just continuing to focus on operational efficiency. I think personally, the pricing will come down, and it has to on producing parts. When you compare additive manufacturing solutions as a price per cubic centimeter or material, it's still significantly more expensive, and it has come down a lot.
Yeah.
Reflect back on my first experience with the rapid prototyping Stratasys machine in college. It was a small centrifugal pump, and it cost, I think, $800 worth of material. Now we can produce the same thing for 50. Well, I think the future is 20, and
Yeah.
it's going to become more and more cheap, or more and more less expensive, or more, yeah, and that's going to increase the volumes. It's going to increase the application, and it'll help. And we've had a lot of growth, but I kind of chuckle a little bit, and when I look at what people talk about the significant growth in additive manufacturing, how it's going to be a 20 or $30 billion business within a few years. Put things into perspective. Elon Musk bought Twitter for $50 billion or something. So
Hmm.
there's individuals that could buy the entirety of our industry. So we are still very much in our infancy, and that is an exciting thing for me. That means that, hey, this has way more room to become a lot bigger than what it is. So that's our frontier, is to be a part of that significant growth story in the bigger picture.
That's a great perspective. Again, I completely agree. It's still excite me every single day a lot, because again, I can see opportunity. That's the biggest thing. When you see the opportunity, when you see the next opportunity, when you're motivated to, like, I just want to try that. Of course, that's, I guess, sky not the limit. So
Yeah.
that's to me absolutely true. Good. So yeah, it was big pleasure to have you, Kason. So as
Likewise.
always, yeah, it's great interaction with you. It's great to have you as the customer, as a friend for the last 7 years. It's just amazing. Again, wish you best luck with all the scaling challenges, of course, and still keep company culture as it is now. So that's perfect. Yeah. Thanks again. Thanks, Kason.
Absolutely. Thank you, Konstantin.
Thank you. All right. Bye bye.
Bye.
And